Today we are talking about weed control. This is based on the chapter titled Control of Weeds and Other Biotic Factors. It is chapter 30 of the book Principles of Agronomy for Sustainable Agriculture. Weeds and their control have been a part of agricultural systems since ancient times. Manual weeding was specifically intended at weed control, but other techniques like tillage, burning, or rotation had also a role in weed control. In 1944, the first hormonal herbicide 2,4-D appeared, and that marked the start of weed science as a separate discipline within the group of crop protection, but very much related to crop production techniques. What is a weed? Weed is any plant growing where it is not wanted. Therefore, that is a subjective definition. Although even crop plants might be weeds if they are left in the field and they might grow within the next crop, the main weeds are around 250 species that have specific characteristics, and these characteristics are related to their dispersion, their persistence, and their capability for competition. First of all, the dispersal of weeds uses the same agents as any other plant, like gravity, winds, animals, water, but it has a specific dispersal mechanism, which is anthropochory, which is the dispersal by human action. And this is carried about the traffic of seeds, packaging, etc., that had led to the globalization of weeds around the world. Therefore, we find the same species in all agricultural systems of the world. In the fields, usually the dispersal occurs at short distances by continuous small flows of seeds from the edges to the center of the fields. The most effective way for weed seeds to arrive to the crop is when they arrive with crop seeds at the time of planting. Here we see the top 10 weeds around the world. The numbers that you see here below each species are the number of crops that the weed affects and the number of countries that are affected by the weed. Number 1 is purple nutsedge, Cyperus rotundus. Number 2, Bermuda grass, Cynodon dactylon. Number 3, barnyard yard grass, Echinocloa cruzgalli. Number 4, jungle rice, Echinocloa colonna. Number 5, Indian goosegrass, Eleusinia indica. Number 6, Johnson grass, Sorghum alepense. Number 7, cogon grass, Imperata cylindrica. Number 8, water hyacinth, Eichhornia crassipes. Number 9, purslane, Portulaca oleracea. And number 10, lamb's quarters, Chenopodium album. These species, in many cases, are C4 plants, as you can see in this table, where 8 in the top 10 weeds are C4 plants. Half of the cases they are perennial species, as indicated in this table, and in many cases they use vegetative propagation by rhizomes with tubers, estolons, and in other cases they use seeds. Once they arrive to the field, the weeds are able, or the weed population is able to persist because of the production of many seeds or other types of propagules, plus keeping mechanism that is seed dormancy. Seed dormancy means that the seed will not germinate when submitted to conditions good for germination, which are adequate temperature and high water content. When the seeds are dormant, they will not germinate, but germination will occur over several years as the seeds lose dormancy progressively. This is a mechanism that ensures the survival of the population under conditions where the weed population is reduced on specific years. The soil seal bank will contain rhizomes, stolons, tubers, bulbs, and seeds, and they will be producing weeds progressively in the long run. There are some factors that contribute to breaking dormancy. First is a high soil water content. The second is a high or even better alternating temperature that allows the seed to detect soil depth at which it is located, because as we move closer to the soil surface, the temperature variation increases. High red-far-red ratio also promote the breaking of dormancy, and that indicates that the conditions are good for germination, as no plant competitors are expected to be above the seed location. In some species, very specific mechanisms occur that respond that the breaking of the dormancy occurs after short exposure to blue light. In these cases, the breaking of dormancy might be prevented by tilling at night, and that works for some species. Breaking of dormancy is also promoted by high nitrate concentration in the soil, high oxygen concentration, or low CO2 concentration. In any case, tillage favors the breaking of dormancy. The weed population, apart from persisting in the agricultural system, it can adapt, and that adaptation occurs very rapidly. It is fast because in many cases we have annual cycles, we have few chromosomes, and we find either self-pollination or vegetative propagation that allows a rapid fixing of the adequate genes. The selective force is the cropping system, the rotation, the tillage and type of tillage applied, the depth of tillage, dates of tillage, etc., and the herbicides used. The forms selected are those that are best for survival in each specific farm. In special, the most successful weeds are those that will be similar to the crop in terms of height, seed size, and maturity date. And the best situation is when the weed is able to be harvested jointly with the crop at harvest time. In summary, weeds are associated to cropping systems, and their characteristics are adapted to each cropping system. Most cases, the weeds have a long persistence, so weeds will be basically a chronic problem. Only in a few cases we might think of eradicating weed populations. In general, we will have varying levels of weed population in the long term. Usually, the weeds will show high persistence, but we can have some exceptions. Weeds might be classified according to their growing cycle as annuals, and in annuals we have winter annuals as those that germinate in the fall and set seed in spring or summer, and usually accompanying winter cereals. Examples of these weeds are Avena sterilis, wild oats, and Sinapis arvensis, wild mustard. We have also weeds that are summer annuals that germinate in the spring and set seed in autumn. They will, of course, accompany spring-summer crops. We have, for instance, Amaranthus retroflexus, red root pigweed, and Portulaca oleracea, common purslane. We can also have biannual weeds that are those that have a first year of vegetative growth. This is called the rosette stage, and then they flower on the second spring. The best example are thistles. Then we have perennial weeds, and many of those show vegetative reproduction. That includes the worst weeds like Cyperus rotundus, purple nutsedge, Cynodon dactylon, Bermuda grass, or Sorghum alepense, Johnson grass. Here we have pictures of Avena sterilis in the upper left, Raphanus species, which is a winter weed, very much related to brassicas and sinapis. Then we have Amaranthus retroflexus, which is a summer weed, and also Portulaca oleracea is a summer weed. This is the thistle, the Cynara cardunculus, in Spanish is cardo. And this is Sorghum alepense, a perennial weed, called also Johnson grass, in Spanish is called cañota. And this is Bermuda grass, Cynodon dactylon. It's one of the worst weeds. In Spanish it's called Grama. And here we have the top one weed, which is Cyperus rotundus, nutsedge. In Spanish it's called juncia. In the upper left photograph we see nutsedge first soon after emergence. In the upper right, we see some details of the root system that includes tubers, and any piece of the rooting system might lead to a new plant. In the lower left, we see the plant in the flowering stage, and in the lower right, we see that these plants might be able to break through black plastic when it is used for weed control. This is due to the sticky points of their leaves. The weeds compete always with the crop because they use resources like light, nutrients, and water. Even more, they might show several advantages over the crop, which might be morphological, like having taller plants or deeper roots, or the advantage may be physiological, like having C4 photosynthesis, which is very common in weeds. They might also show some allelopathy against the crop. Other negative effects on the crop are the hindering of harvest or the degradation of crop quality by adding color, smell, taste, or adding toxins to the harvested product. To calculate the crop yield for a given weed density, we might use the reciprocal yield law that we saw on chapter 12 of the book, that relates crop yield with crop plant density. In this equation, we have added a new term that is related to the density of plants of the weed. So the more plant density of the weeds, the greater the competition will be, and the greater the crop reduction will be. Using an equation like this, we can calculate the income due to yield by multiplying yield by the price of the product. And we can plot that against the weed plant population as in this figure. If we plot here vertical segment here representing the treatment cost, the intersect with this curve will provide a value of plant density, of weed plant density, which is the so-called economic threshold. In other way, the value of planting density where the cost of control equals the economic loss due to weeds. The idea is that when the planting density and the weed density is below the economic threshold, it is not economic to apply the treatment. And why? Because we would be losing money. But if the weed plant population is larger than the economic threshold, it is economic to apply the treatment because we would be losing less money. The economic threshold can be deduced from the previous equation by equating the cost of control to the economic loss due to weed. And this threshold, dPWU, is a function of the harvest index, of planting density, of the cost of control, and the price of the product, and the competitive ability of the weed. Look that the higher the cost of control, the higher the threshold will be, and that the higher the price of the product, the smaller the threshold will be. Now let's talk a little bit about pest control in general. So we will not only be including weeds, but other pests like insects or diseases. In general, the goal of pest control will be to keep populations of biotic enemies of the crop at low levels. In general, eradication will be difficult or even impossible when we're talking about weeds. It will be expensive and, in general, very toxic and dangerous. So eradication is not usually an alternative. First of all, we have to use prevention by using clean seeds, clean machinery, and keeping the margins of the fields clean of weeds that might produce new weed seeds or might host insects or diseases. The primary and the classic way of controlling weeds have been tillage. Tillage might cut, bury, or uproot the weed plants. However, it has the negative effect of promoting weed germination. Here we see a picture of a plant uprooted by tillage. Uprooting causes death by desiccation. Here we see different alternatives for weed control. Hand pulling requires a lot of labor, but is a technique that is only intended at weed control. But we can do hoeing using a hoe, like here, or we can harrow using a harrow, like this one, or apply flaming. By flaming, what we do is we burn the weed plants. At a larger scale, we might apply weed control, or we might use black plastic for mulching of the soil. We see here a strawberry crop protected using black plastic that prevents the germination of new weeds or will kill any germinated seeds by carbon starvation. Here we see solarization, which consists of irrigating the bare soil and then putting a transparent plastic film on top of the soil, and that will cause the soil temperature to raise up to, say, around 60 degrees in summer, and that will help controlling soil-borne diseases. Mowing is another alternative for weed control, which can be very effective in the short run, but after several years of mowing, we will be selecting creeping species and genotypes, so it will not be effective anymore. Flooding is the control method used in rice. It prevents the germination of weeds and will kill any emerged seedlings. Other control techniques are associated or are related to crop production. First, crop rotation and the management of soil residues. In general, the alternating of crops is good because that implies alternating control measures, and that avoids selection of specific pests more suited to our cropping system. Soil-borne pathogens are effectively controlled by long rotations, as they are poor saprophytes, so the population of soil-borne pathogens will decrease very strongly after several years without the host crop. If we use high density, we might increase leaf area index. That in some cases increases the risk of aerial diseases, as the microenvironment around the crop will be more humid. However, a higher density and a higher leaf area index means a higher probability of compensating possible losses of plants due to disease or other pests. The irrigation method and the irrigation frequency might play a role in the incidence of specific diseases. Soil wetting promotes the germination of weed seeds, so avoiding wetting the soil surface will be good to avoid weed infestation. Here we see a picture of crop with subsurface drip irrigation, where the surface is not wetted. We see almost no weeds at all, and here by its side we have a crop with surface drip irrigation, where the amount of weeds is obvious. In some soil-borne pathogens, reducing the frequency of irrigation might be good to reduce the incidence of the disease. That might be the case with olive trees as affected by verticillium wilt. On the other side, when we wet the whole plant, like by applying sprinkler irrigation, we will be promoting the airborne pathogens, aerial diseases. As we have seen, tillage promotes the germination of weeds. Therefore, in some cases, we apply what is called a stale seedbed, in other words, a false seedbed. What we do is that we prepare the seedbed, but instead of seeding right after that, we allow weed germination for some time, and then we apply some control of the weeds, either by tillage, like applying a shallow recultivation, or applying a herbicide, and after that we will sow the crop. With that, we will have removed, or we will have been able to control most of the weed seeds that were close to the soil surface, that would be in other case affecting our crop later. Using adequate genotypes is also an important factor for the control of pests. In the case of aerial diseases, it's very common to have resistant or tolerant genotypes, for instance, for aerial diseases. In general, after some time, the resistant genotypes are not resistant anymore because of the appearance of new pathotypes. Therefore, the breeding companies will be producing new resistant genotypes continuously. There are genetically modified organisms that are important for pest control. The first case is those of the Roundup Ready genotypes, which are resistant to glyphosate. Therefore, you can spray glyphosate after emergence of the crop. that will kill the weed plants but will not affect the crop. This is widely used in areas of South America, for soybean, for instance. The other important case is that of so-called Bt plants that are able to produce the Bt toxin that kills Lepidoptera larvae. Therefore, when the insect feeds on the plant, the insects will be killed. That is intended to reduce the amount of insecticides used. Biological control is also an alternative for some cases for controlling pests. In the case of weeds, the most important case was the control of Opuntia stricta in Australia. The prickly pear became an important ecological problem because it had no natural enemies after its introduction to Australia. It was finally controlled by using Cactobactis cactorum, which is an insect that feeds on the scales of this plant. The biological control of insects might be performed using coccinellidae, like ladybirds and ladybugs, that feed on aphids and scale insects. The most important are Coccinella septempunctata, that feeds on aphids, and Harmonia axillidis, the harlequin ladybird, that feeds on scales. Finally, a few words about weed management, which is a longer-term view of weed control. It requires a good knowledge of weed ecology and takes into account the evolution of the weed population following the cropping system characteristics. It is based on long-term strategies and the alternation of measures. What we do is that we apply a given alternative for control for several years until we select specific genotypes of weeds. After that, we change the control measures so we'll be more efficient for controlling those specific genotypes. What we are really doing is we are cheating the weed population, so we are selecting for specific genotypes that will be easier to control by changing the control technique.